Hello, fight fans, and welcome to the Combat Challenge podcast. My guest today is a former UFC light heavyweight athlete with over 17 professional bouts to his name. He now spends his time coaching athletes to become champions and is a head honcho of Blackledge MMA. Mr. Tom, the Juggernaut Blackledge. Nice to see you, my brother. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me on, mate.
No, my pleasure. First question I got to ask you, Tom, is where did the fight name, the Juggernaut, come from?
Well, it came from Quintan Rampage gave it me. So obviously, with my time coaching with Quintan and being good friends with him and messing about, and then there's an old video on the internet from the Juggernaut, the character from the X-Men. There was a funny cartoon where they changed it, and the guy would go about saying, "I'm the Juggernaut, bitch," and it just became this little joke, running joke thing, and then Rampage just started calling me the Juggernaut, and it just sort of went from there, really.
It's your MMA journey from a young age. What sort of sports you got into that led you to where you are now?
Japanese traditional jiu-jitsu, judo, kickboxing, and that was mainly like what I did, and just practiced martial arts and was just into martial arts and training. My old sensei, my jiu-jitsu sensei, at the time opened up a pretty, it was really ahead of his time. Terry, he opened a school, a full-time school, and there weren't really many of them about. So like I was able to, I was only a kid, I was only really young. I was literally like 18, I think, at the time. And I was running this, it was like a gym and the martial arts studio in the same building. So I'm forever grateful for him for doing that for me, because that was really the one of the many catalysts that sped me on my martial arts journey. Becoming a black belt with him and teaching traditional martial arts. The UFC was very much in its infancy and pretty much unheard of here, but watching a lot of the guys like Marco Huaz, people like that, they were the ones who I was watching and thinking, these were the guys I wanted to emulate, and be like. So then we started training, and I would go to a lot of the security lads around town, the door lads, and I would have fights with them. Not in like, it comes across a little bit like, I don't know, a bit aggressive. It weren't like that. It was in the thing of, I want to see a good eye on at fights, and let's have a fight, and then we can get better together, and I will teach you and you teach me, kind of thing. And it sort of became this like fight club, really. This was a long time ago. We started wrestling, and then I started like this submission class, MMA class, in around 99 probably. We would be doing a lot of this kind of stuff, something like that. And it went from there, really. We carried on and continued training and studying, and obviously I went and fought. But even fighting wasn't what it is now. There weren't a plan as such to go into fighting and to do it back then. It was just have a little test and see what's happening. And then early 2001, the shows over here were sort of happening a little bit, but even then they weren't like, people didn't aim from over here to go to the UFC or to go to Pride or to do things like that. They did back then. It weren't even known, was it? And it wasn't expected. So from then on, I ended up fighting, doing bits, and then eventually that gym shut, and I got way more into the sports side of martial arts, should I say. I was fortunate enough to pick up a great judo sensei who I trained with regularly when I was younger there. Derek was a great guy. He helped me so much, alongside Terry. And then gradually, as that business shut, I went off and started just teaching MMA then, in these small places. Like I'd rent out a place and try and get Blackledge MMA running, back then. And then, and then after that, we went to Wolfslair then.
You said you then went on to Wolfslair. Can you tell me a little bit about how that came about and who are you training with down there?
Yeah, so when I went to Wolfslair, I mean, this was unheard of really back then, because I knew I needed someone to get me to where I wanted to be. I needed to be part of a team. Now, I had a team in that I had a few of my students who were some of my closest friends and still are now, like Ian Quigley, Scott Mitchell, Dave Lee. These guys I'd taught fighting, but then we just became really good friends. But I needed the guy who was my coach. And you know, I believe that the universe gives you a lot of things that you want when, you know, you can manifest pretty simply. I understand that now, but back then I didn't. But what happened was the Wolfslair came about through a friend of a friend. I knew someone who knew Anthony. He was the owner of one of the co-owners of the gym, who later became my manager. He said about this gym, what's going to be opening in Widnes, and about going down. So gradually over the months, as this gym was being built, I spoke to a guy called Kazeka. He was the coach at the time, Kazeka Muniz. He was a black belt, and he was part of Golden Glory in Amsterdam. A team. I don't know if the team's still going there, but they're a very prevalent team for anyone involved in MMA in 2000 to 2010. Probably you would know that team. And so he came over, and so I arranged to go and meet him, and we went and trained. And after training with him, he was like, right. And I spoke to Anthony, and then I was the first guy to sign with the Wolfslair as one of their fighters, as a pro fighter, which is obviously a very prestigious honor to represent such a great team and be the first. And then from then on, Kazeka sort of was the coach there for a little while. And then Mario Sakata came. And Mario came as a fighter originally, and then was the coach. And he's the only person I would say who I would call my coach. Really, I wouldn't. I had Dave Jackson as well, who's coached Thai boxing, and I've had the pleasure of training under Mark Kinney and Tony Quigley, boxing coaches. And I've also had many pleasure training under many different guys. But Mario's the only BJJ coach that I've had. I've never put a gi on in anyone else's gym or class or anything like that. I've only ever trained with Mario there. And obviously, I would say that for striking, Dave and Mark and Tony are the striking coaches that I've spent the majority of my time with, and then there have been other coaches obviously as well, but they were the main guys in the Wolfslair gym.
Tom, I was doing some research on you and looking at some highlight clips of you. Now, there's one fight that I'm going to mention, and I'd like you to tell the viewers about it. It was a fight you had against a guy called Tom Howard, and it reminded me of a fight in the UFC that Yves Edward had with Josh Thompson. If you can kind of tell us the preparation, what you knew about Tom, and just talk us through the fight.
Yeah, so that was a really big fight. That one, that was in Cage Rage when it was at Wembley, when it was really big. Obviously, back then, these shows were huge. Like, there was such Cage Rage was an exceptional show. I think Dave and Andy did such a good job back in the day of what they did with that show. I thought it was brilliant. And I think in looking back on my career, that those are part of the highlights, what I really, would say were great. The fight with Tom. Now, Tom was an American guy, and he'd fought on a show called IFL recently. He'd fought Krzysztof Soszyński. He had a really good fight with him, really back and forth fighting. And Krzysztof, I think he was in the Ultimate Fighter and then went on to be quite dominant in the UFC at light heavyweight for a little while, and was a popular fighter. But he had a really good fight with him. So when he came in, I knew he was tough, but with training wise, I'd broke my leg not long before we took that fight. Now, I took the fight because it was Cage Rage and it was obviously such a big show. Now, I broke my shin in training, I actually shot a double leg, and in the cage, for those who don't know, the canvas in a cage is it can be a bit slippy if it's dry. If you've got dry feet, and you'll see a lot of the time fighters will put water on the floor, beforehand, like so that they can put the feet in, damp the feet, and they get a bit of grip on the feet. Now in the cage, the mat was a little bit dry, the canvas was a little bit dry, and I'd shot a double leg, and one of my partners had sprawled, and as he sprawled, my foot had slipped, and so it ended up snapping my leg, so I ended up breaking my leg. And so obviously I had to come back and I had a cast on. And then that was for 6 weeks. And then I think it was about 7 weeks after I'd had my cast off, I had the fight. So if you look, I was a little bit heavier than I would normally be. Was because of that, because I weren't able to do any road work or anything like that because I couldn't run. And I'd also damaged my hand in training. So that's what led to that kick, really. We'd been practicing the high kick a lot. I used to do that a lot with Dave Jackson and with our Thai coach in Wolfslair. But then when I was wrestling with Tom, if you watch, I do like a lateral drop and take him down, and he manages to get straight back up. And then because I couldn't control the grip properly because I had a bad hand, I thought I'm just going to kick. And obviously the Yves Edwards fight popped up in my head, and as I did it, and I kicked him and caught him, and knocked him out, and then that was that. That was the fight. Really nice guy. I spoke to him afterwards, and felt terrible, to be honest, because he came in and he had all staples in his head, and it was a terrible cut. Obviously fighting, there is no ill will in fighting. It's just about the competition and trying to be the better you that you can be at the time. And when he came in with the staples, I thought, but I spoke to him over MySpace, actually. So that's how long ago it was, over MySpace, and he was doing like a lot of heat lamp therapy and stuff like that, and it helped heal up a lot of the scarring, which was nice to see. But performance-wise, I felt great in that and took in a lot of the moment, and yeah, it was a good time. How
deep was his cut? Because it just started bleeding straight away, didn't it? As soon as he hit the floor, right?
Yeah. Oh, it was a terrible, terrible cut. They took him straight off to see like some surgeon and that, and they had to staple it all, and it was because my shin caught him perfectly. The shin just split across his head. Yeah, it was a terrible cut. It weren't something I was proud of, really. After seeing the effect of what it had done, I didn't feel great. But obviously, that's just the sport, and things happen like that in fighting, don't they? So.
And was it after that or before that when you did another high kick KO in M1 Global?
It was after. I've had a few high kick KOs, some aren't on my record, but the one in M1 was after that. That was when I was back at 205 again. That I was back at light heavyweight. In that one, like you'll see people say like I was aggressive to the guy, but he spoke quite badly of me and was a bit saying he was going to break my arm and all this stuff, and so that I ended up buying into it a little bit. And also the week before I was really ill. If you remember, I mean, appropriately now, similar to what's going on with all the virus outbreak and all that. If you remember when it was at the time of swine flu and they were checking for people being really ill and all that stuff, it's just stuck in my head because I remember, but I was really ill, and they weren't going to use me because I was so ill. So they brought out another guy from England who may replace me, if I couldn't pass the medical. So I cut the weight, but I was so desperate to fight because that's just what we do, isn't it? If you're a fighter, you just want to fight, and you need other people to sort of step in and help you out, and said no. But I was desperate to fight. So luckily, as we got closer to the fight, I could make weight, and I ended up cutting weight, and then took the fight, and then got the 9 second. That was a KO of the year, 2009. Yeah, 2009.
Who are the coaches or mentors that have been significant on your martial arts journey, and why?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, first off, my original sensei was a guy called Terry Hall. He was instrumental in my career, really. Without him even knowing it, I have gratitude towards him, massive gratitude to him, because he was the one who got me on the path, really, without even knowing. He had no interest in MMA, and I believe still doesn't. We speak from time to time when I can. He doesn't live near me, but we obviously we converse when we can. He had no interest in MMA. The sport side doesn't interest him at all. But he led me on that path. He got me on that path because of what he did, giving me that job and helping me to coach and to teach, and getting me on courses to become a better coach and better instructor. Other coaches, as I said, Mario Sukata is he's the only jiu-jitsu coach I've ever put a gi on with. I have a loyalty, you know, with people. I always find that I have a bond with someone. If someone's my coach, then I think it's a prestigious relationship, you know, to have, for me to be called coach to people and for me to call coach someone a coach. I think it's an important thing, and an important relationship. So to me, I never put a gi on, like I said, with anyone else except Mario. I'd done MMA things before, obviously, and grappled before and done wrestling before. But Mario is my jiu-jitsu coach. He's the only one. If someone said to me, who do you do jiu-jitsu under? It would be Mario, that's it. Thai boxing wise, the same. I've been fortunate to train with quite a lot of different guys and what have you. But Dave Jackson is who I spent most of my time training with, and he was a guy who padded me and did things. And then Mark Kinney and Tony Quigley both played a big part in my boxing training, and all of them are great coaches. You know, I mean, they all have the, you know, great strengths.
Can you share with myself and the viewers, out of all those fights, which is the one that's quite rewarding? It doesn't have to be a win. It could be some adversity or something you've overcome. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, I think every fight is rewarding within, you know, with its own parameters. I think depending what you're looking for, you know, certain fights have rewarded me with knowledge on coaching, on how to do something or how not to do something, how to get the best from someone and how not to get the best from someone, and also facing that adversity in a fight. I think sometimes it isn't so much the fight, it's the weeks and weeks and weeks before it, you know, and developing the discipline to do a lot of the things that need to be done. I think it spreads into your life that much that it helps with all your other stuff later on when you retire. And looking at fight wise, I had a fight with a guy called Julian Gonzalez. You know, we're friends on Instagram, we chat, and, you know, we've said when we get a chance we're going to train. And this is, oh man, it must be like 20 years ago. And it was a great fight. We had a great fight. Technically, in the fight, I didn't do anything near to what I was capable of doing, and that was understanding, you know, understanding how fighting it works really, because I would go in there and it was like, just get involved in this scrap and be super hyped up and put it all in. And we had a great fight. I was injured. I had a bad jaw before I went in. I'd been damaged, and yet we had this great fight. Put it all in there. And I was ill for weeks afterwards. I was throwing up all the time. I had bad concussion, really ill. But I took a lot from it in that I knew where I could take myself in a fight, and I knew what was needed. It changed a lot of the time how I would train. I have had so many fights, and in the losses and the wins, I've taken so much from them. You know, that inner voice, what talks to you, that performance anxiety, understanding all them things. When I've been in there and wanted to be out as quick as I could, and then when I've been that perfectly aligned that I understood.
Now, Blackledge MMA is a well-established gym, and it's been around for a long time. Are there any other coaches that help contribute with the running of Blackledge MMA? And if so, what role do they play?
Well, we have a few of the fighters who coach. Obviously, at the minute, we're in like a really bit of a terrible situation with what's going on. It's difficult. You know, most of the guys can't train. But, you know, we have a lot of the fighters who coach and will help. So like the amateur fighters, some of the others, they'll take like a lot of the beginners courses, like Alex Dyke covers a lot of the beginner type intro courses and things like that. He's a fighter. Andy Clamp takes loads of classes for me when needed. He coaches quite a lot. And then we have a few of the younger ones like Josh Kennedy. He teaches. We have a few of the others who coach. But at the minute, obviously, with what's going on, there's not really that much going on for the past, 10 months, 11 months, something like that. We haven't been able to get going again. As you know yourself, the MMA gyms, you can't really be open. We haven't been able to be open for all of the pandemic. This few months again, like it's not like we were able to fully reopen our classes 3 months ago before we went into our lockdown again. We haven't been able to open since the start in March, and I'm hopeful that soon we'll be back to normal and all our gym, along with everyone else's, can be back and start going again. Because I do fear that it might be quite detrimental to the sport, and obviously there's no shows going on really. There's not much going on. People aren't training the same. They aren't able to train the same.
Now, Tom, for you, you're on this martial arts journey and you've competed at the Premiership level and you're coaching as well at a well-established place. There'll be other people that are on the conveyor belt, they're just slightly behind you. From your knowledge and experience, what could you pass on to those that are still on the same conveyor belt but some distance behind you?
Right, so as far as athletes, for the fighters, I think find a team that suits you. You're going to have an ethos in you that is probably going to be needed to be matched by the coach and the other team, the team around you and the team around him. Who are around you, do they want your success as much as they want their success? And do you want their success as much as you want your success? And I think that's an important part of being in the sport. If you aren't a team player, like as much as MMA is on your own, and you do have to be selfish to a degree in your life, you have to be selfish because you have to put so much time and effort in. If you don't have good guys around you, and if you're not willing to put that effort in with them and to help them, then why will they do it with you? And I think a lot of people miss that, and seemingly now more than ever, people are becoming more selfish and wanting this now, wanting it now, and they have to have this success now, and they forget about to give, to get you need to give, to receive you need to give, and I think personally for myself, I think being part of a team is very important, and even for a sport that you're just on your own, if that's what you're wanting to, if that's what's in you, I think that's what you need to go find. But ultimately, look at the team, look at the people, look at how they carry themselves, how do you carry yourself. If you want to go and find, like attracts like, doesn't it? So go find those people who are like you, and see what you're after, and don't rush, because it takes a long time. And don't do it for money, because there's not much money in it. Even now, Conor McGregor's made a lot of money, but I can tell you now, a lot of people didn't, and a lot of people don't, and they're hurt and they're damaged, and they have a lot of surgeries. And if money is your driving factor, there's a lot of other things that can make your money a lot quicker. I think you need to be wanting to be a martial artist and get better and just enjoy fighting. I think you need to be enjoying it if you wanted to do it. And I think that for me, when I retired, I was so injured. I had so many injuries, and then in my last fight, I broke my hand. I couldn't use my hand for months and months afterwards. It was just in a terrible state, and then my neck was so bad, and I was just like, I think I'm just burnt out and done with it all now, And I'd done it wrong, really. I hadn't looked after myself in the way that I should have. And I think you have to be enjoying it, because if you're not enjoying it, then you're certainly doing the wrong thing. And it is hard. It's a very hard life. So be prepared for 10 years of slog and thinking you're so close, but just not getting anywhere. And each little step is just going on.
It's just the grind, isn't it, brother? It's the grind.
That's it, exactly. That's what you've got to do. You've got to keep going, and the wins and losses come and go, and the people around you come and go. And like you said before, you've got to see who's there when you've lost. Are they still there and supporting you? And these wins and losses, I think at the minute the amateur scene, I mean, obviously apart from this last year, But the amateur scene with the shows, obviously, like with Ice, what myself, Aaron and Carl have built up. The shows like Ice and FCC and all these shows are the big shows for the pros, have such a massive availability for amateur fighters to get fighting, and you can build up an amateur record of 20 fights. I mean, you know, that's crazy that you can get this, and obviously Combat Challenge. Do you know what I mean? And it's like to have the opportunity to fight on a show in a cage with MMA gloves on, you're doing a fight, and it's irrelevant. You could have 20 fights and lose them all, and then on one fight you win, and then you go, do you know what, I'm going pro, and then you've got your plan and you know what you're doing. But you have all this time to make them mistakes and embrace the fact that you can make the mistakes, because once you go pro, you can't really go back. And I think take your time, build yourself up, get a coach who's going to look at the fights and choose the fights that are right for you, you know, and build you. And I think how blessed to be in that opportunity. There are fights every month, really, aren't there? You can go and fight pretty regular in the normal scheme of things. Obviously, with pre-COVID, you know, you had the opportunity to get onto these shows and just have a fight. But people are trying to be the best amateur. I'm thinking, no one cares about the best amateur. It's like, I think that with the kids are killing these kids off, and they're like 10, 11, 12-year-old kids, and they're putting them through full-time pro regimes. And I'm thinking, it's insane. You're going to burn your kid out. No one cares who's the best 13-year-old in the world. I couldn't tell you who it was. I don't know who it was. I'm not bothered either. I have no interest in it. You know, and I find it all very strange that they burn these kids out so much.
Brother Tom, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and experience on this podcast, and I look forward to seeing you on the future podcast, my friend.
Anytime, mate. Thank you for having me. If anyone wants to see any fight stuff or instructional stuff, just go to Fighter Blueprint on YouTube, and you'll see some techniques, what we put on there, and videos and things like that.
For sure. Thank you. See you later, my friend.
See you, pal.